Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Suzuki, and welcome to today's session, our Rise and Shine session, that is. So for those of you who haven't participated in the past, the Rise and Shine sessions are updates from Vrbo and Expedia Group, specifically for our vacation rental management partners. In the past, for the past 2 years, these sessions have been on site, and we've been presenting them and going to 25 different locations around the country. And presenting these updates throughout the year. But COVID-19 kind of grounded me. And so we're moving these to online, which has been actually a really, really great thing because we've changed these sessions from 4-hour morning sessions to 30-minute segments. And we're doing it all online, and we're recording these sessions now. So the place where you registered to be here today, you can go back to that same place, bookmark it, because it's got all the recordings, and it will have all future recordings of Rise and Shines that you guys can share with other people and reference back to yourself. All right, my name is John Suzuki, and my title, I've been told that I have one of the best titles in the company. My title is Global Evangelist and Ombudsman. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it means that as evangelist, I talk a lot and I educate, and as ombudsman, I listen and in a lot of ways advocate. So basically listening to all of you as we speak to you guys and taking all your input and feedback and feeding it back to the leadership of Expedia Group and Vrbo. Really, really fun job. Sometimes it's hard, right, when we're not doing the right things, but eventually we generally do get things right. All right, with regards to questions for today's session, you can look to your sidebar on the right-hand side, and you'll see a Q&A tab. So ask your questions in that Q&A tab, and we're going to answer all of your questions. We may run out of time today, and so if we do run out of time, we will answer your questions and respond back to you, okay? But we will also answer as many questions as we can today. All right, so the topic for today is government relations, okay? It is suddenly, because of COVID-19, has become one of the hottest topics that people want to talk about, because COVID-19 has driven all kinds of behavior all over the world with all different kinds of municipalities, and it's just kind of crazy. And so for today, we're going to talk with you about the latest and what's going on in this area. And from what I know, Vrbo and Expedia Group really are doing more than anybody else, I think, in the world, specifically around the area of government relations for whole homes and vacation rental managers. So I am super, super excited to introduce you to our speakers today. First of all, we have Philip Minardi. And Philip Minardi, if you want to, thank you very much. Philip Minardi, he heads up our public affairs group in Expedia Group. And he's been around for a while, and he's responsible for this area all over North America and the Caribbean. He's a former VP of Communications at the Travel Technology Association, and he also was the head of communications for one of the U.S. representatives in Congress. So he's got a ton of experience, and he's just been an amazing guy to work with. So Philip, welcome. We also have Dana. Dana is here, and she heads up Mile High Hosts and is the owner of Effortless Rentals in the Denver area. Mile High Hosts is basically an advocacy group, right, in the Denver area, and she also serves on the Denver Short-Term Rental Advisory Committee, and she's a member which meets with the members of the City Council of Denver. So she is an absolute superstar and a superhero in this area, and we are so happy and appreciative to have Dana with us. So with this, I am going to head it off to Philip. And Philip, if you want to take us through what's going on.
Thank you, John. And as John mentioned, my name is Philip Minardi, and I have the unique pleasure of heading public affairs for Expedia Group. And I use the word pleasure with great intent, because what my job is to travel across the country when we're not in a global pandemic and meet with not only elected officials, but political press, as well as local property managers and owners, to talk about what good, fair, and effective short-term rental policies look like. And over the course of the last 5 years or so, I've been able to connect with local property managers and owners in every single state in the union except for two, Alaska and West Virginia. So if you're calling from, if you're joining us today from Alaska or West Virginia, let's huddle up after this call to get me up to all 50 states. But when John asked me to talk a little bit at the beginning of this Rise and Shine today, and I was thinking about it, I came to the realization that we should probably answer three important questions. The first question being, where are we currently as it relates to government regulations for vacation rentals? Number two, what do we need to be doing right now, sitting in your office, sitting in your home? What do we need to be doing to help advance fair and effective short-term rental policies? And lastly, what is Expedia Group doing to help? And I'm going to try and get all this done in a matter of minutes, even though I know it's a conversation we could probably have over the course of a couple of hours. But to kick it off, I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are currently as it relates to regulations for vacation rentals. And the reality is we all understand that COVID-19 has changed the world in pretty significant ways. Not only the travel and tourism economy, but more particularly the property management community. And a lot of the folks, I'm sure, on this webinar today have been greatly impacted by COVID-19. And I would just want to start off by letting you all know that the entire Expedia Group and Vrbo team is here for you. So if there's anything we can do, please reach out. But as it relates to regulations, there really is a new paradigm for regulations and what elected officials are thinking about as it relates to COVID. And when I'm talking to local property managers, when I'm talking to elected officials, when I'm talking to the press, I like to frame out those concepts into three buckets. Elected officials are concerned about trust, number one, and I'm sure most folks on this call can sympathize with that. Elected officials are concerned about whether or not our industry has done enough or is doing enough to bring trust to the marketplace and make sure when we're bringing travelers, families into our communities that we're doing so in a safe way. The second component of the regulatory conversations happening right now across North America is around transparency. Elected officials that I speak with on a regular basis, now more than ever before, are really keen to understand the activity that is happening in their community, understanding who's being brought into their neighborhoods, understanding what property management companies are operating in their neighborhoods, understanding what global platforms like Expedia Group are doing in their communities. And then lastly, if you've joined a city hall meeting or if you've read the local newspaper, revenue is key at this point. Local markets that we operate in tend to be traditional vacation destinations, and without any travelers coming to those destinations, cities are scrambling for revenue. So those are the three big components of the regulatory conversation that's happening, particularly in a COVID world. And there's two ways we can look at that as an industry, as an opportunity or as a challenge. The way Expedia Group looks at it is we view it as an opportunity because we know that traditional vacation rental managers across the country have answers to those three questions about trust, about transparency, and about revenue. But it's not a conversation that hasn't started yet. This is a conversation that is ongoing. These are questions that elected officials are asking not tomorrow, but today and yesterday. So we're seeing communities in Hawaii, in California, in New Mexico, in Texas, in Florida, all up and down the East Coast, starting to ask questions about how do we regulate the vacation rental space in a COVID environment. And we have to be ready to answer those questions as an industry and as partners, both from the platform perspective, but also from the property manager perspective as well. So that gets us to the second question, which is, what do we need to be thinking about? What do we need to be doing? And we're going to get into a lot of this during the Q&A session, but I wanted to lay out a couple thoughts for you. Number one, as I mentioned, trust is key. Every time I sit down with an elected official or a reporter, the first question out of their mouths is, what is the vacation rental industry doing to address things like cleanliness, to address things like trust? And I think we as an industry in particular can take an immense amount of pride in what we've done to address those concerns and assuage that anguish. So hopefully folks have seen the communications we've sent out about Vrbo's cleanliness guidelines, and the attributes that we have on your PDP, on your listings currently, to help you communicate what you're doing in your properties around trust. But we've also worked with the industry. So we partnered with VRMA as they were compiling their cleanliness guidelines and worked hand in glove with them. But also from a macro perspective, beyond the borders of the vacation rental world, we worked with U.S. Travel Association, which is the big trade association for all of travel and tourism in the U.S., to help them think about their guidelines for the broader tourism economy as well. So number one is we need to be thinking about how we tell our own story about trust. Number two is how we've helped during the pandemic. A lot of the questions I get are around what is the industry doing, how are you helping local small businesses, and we have a plethora of stories as it relates to that, and we should be talking about that as an industry and as a community. And then lastly, we have an opportunity coming out of COVID-19, working together, we have an opportunity to be in control of the narrative and to work with elected officials and together to plot a way out of this pandemic that leads to fair and effective policies for all of us across the country and indeed across the continent. So those are the things we should be thinking about as we go into this conversation, as we leave this conversation and go back into our daily lives. And then lastly, just want to touch on before we get to the Q&A, how Expedia helps. And you see it on the slide, hopefully y'all are in front of a computer, but there's a lot of words here on the computer screen, and I want to boil it down for you. What I do for a living, what my team does for a living every single day and twice on Sunday is advocate for you, is to advocate for fair and effective policies for the traditional vacation rental owner, manager community. That is what I do. That is my passion. That is the passion of over 30 people here in the United States and indeed across the globe that work on the Expedia Group government relations team. And it's not just on the lobbying front. A lot of folks maybe have read about the work that we've done on the lobbying front, hiring lobbyists in markets to go in and talk with elected officials. But the reality is, when you have these conversations with a government, we can't do it alone. And in no market have I ever seen a win for our industry where a platform has not worked hand in glove with local property managers and owners. And as John mentioned, I take immense pride in the partnerships we've fostered with local vacation rental managers and owners across this country over the course of the last decade. We've been able to help start, support over 100 local alliances. We've helped over 200,000 Vrbo partners connect with their local officials, and we're here for you today. So if you're in a market where you don't have a local alliance, where you don't have a group that's together, please reach out, please let us know. So we're there to lobby, we're there to help you when it comes to partner advocacy, getting a local group up and running. But a lot of what we also do is in regards to communications and PR. We all read the front pages of a lot of newspapers that position our industry as scofflaws or just party houses, and we all understand that's not the truth. So a lot of what we do is help you communicate your story, communicate your value to elected officials and to reporters as well. And then lastly, third-party partnerships is a big priority for Expedia Group and for Vrbo because it takes a village to win these fights. And it's not just us, it's not just you, but it's also the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, VRMA, the Internet Association, new amazing groups like Rent Responsibly. Working with them is a key component of what we do on a day in and day out basis. So hopefully that gives you all a little bit of an understanding of what Expedia Group Government Affairs does currently. But I would leave you with one thing before we get into the Q&A, which is it truly does take a village. And if you're in a market right now where you haven't reached out to other property managers, you haven't joined a local alliance, please reach out to me. Please reach out to my team, reach out to Dana, who we're going to hear from here in a minute. And we're there to help you every step of the way get involved because it's going to take your engagement for us to start to turn the tide against these negative vacation rental policies. John, hopefully I did that quick enough for you.
Yeah, way to go. Nice job. All right, so just to let everybody know, so the presentation part of this is going to be 30 minutes, right? But we have also allowed for 15 minutes. This is the only session so far that we're allowing the additional 15 minutes for Q&A. So we're gonna first go into the most commonly asked questions of what folks have asked, and then we'll go into as many of your questions as we can. at the 30-minute mark. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and go into the first question. We got 5 questions that we want to share with you guys. So Dana, I think this one's for you. So government relations has evolved in many, many different ways, right? In the old days, we used to all complain about NIMBYs. We still do, not in my backyard kinds of people, right? Because they typically were the people that went on vacation and then decided they wanted to live there and then decided they didn't want anybody else to be able to go there on vacation. And since they're retired, they decided to go to city council meetings all the time. And so we dealt with them. And then we dealt with the rise of the idea of hosted homes and companies that went out and tried to fight for government regulations that was favorable to those folks that just want to rent rooms out of their homes. And so we saw that happen. And then through it all, we see different lobbies. We see the hotel lobbies and competition per se that we've had to deal with. And now we got COVID-19. We're having to deal with this. And Philip had mentioned a comment about revenue. So where are we now? Where are we in this overall evolution of advocating for vacation rentals?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to be here and honored to be part of this conversation. Let me just kick off. And, this specific topic, sometimes I feel like, where is my qualification in weighing on these things here? Because I feel like still new to this whole space. I got into the industry about 3 years ago. So what I can speak to in regards to what I've seen as far as the evolution of advocacy is that it is growing tremendously. I would almost compare it to the speed in which technology has grown at a rapid rate. And it's almost because the demand of it has accelerated our efforts and sped up the conversations and created opportunities like we're experiencing right here today. I mean, specifically to Denver, where I'm speaking to you from, short-term rentals were illegal. They became regulated. Expedia and all of the major players were involved in that conversation. But eventually what we came to was that primary residence was going to be what our ordinance required in order for people to short-term rent. At that point, the advocacy efforts for the people that were involved at that time they took their foot off the pedal, you could say. When I joined the conversation, I realized, holy moly, we've got quite the storm happening. We were seeing hosts being sent affidavits and then even hosts being charged with felonies. And I thought, oh my God, we've lost control. So that's when the advocacy group I'm a member of started last spring. And we really said, hey, everybody has to get involved. This isn't a conversation that you can put on the burner. This needs to be the forefront of what we're all focusing on. And at this point, there's no competitors. We're all in this together. So I've seen in my own personal experience a massive acceleration. Of course, COVID has been a big contributor to that.
Awesome.
Yeah, John, I would just add on to that. Dana's being a little bit coy. My answer to that question, Dana is the evolution. People like Dana are the evolution of this conversation because she's thinking about it in a different way than has been thought about in the past, which is historically there has been a view when it comes to advocacy that it's adversarial. It's our industry versus the city. It's our industry versus hotels. It's our industry versus hosted stay, the renting somebody's back bedroom type of model. Mm-hmm. And people like Dana have changed the paradigm to where now it's a conversation and it's collaborative. So one of the things I would give Dana a lot of credit for is something they did last year, which is the Good Neighbor Summit, where her team brought together not only property managers, but city officials, community members to have a conversation about how do we regulate this industry in a responsible way that the whole community can get behind. So I think the evolution is from a war footing, from a very combative stance, to more of a professional, collaborative, let's do what's right for the entire community type of philosophy.
Great point. Great point. That's a great segue into our next question. So, one of the things that you had mentioned a little bit earlier, Philip, is that it does take a village. It takes much more than a village. It takes all of us, right? In having these dialogues. And so, what I have found in the past is that a lot of folks felt that somebody else would take care of it, right? And of course, a lot of times people would wake up in the morning and find out that the night before the city council passed an ordinance that nobody knew about in the dark of the night. And so, the whole idea is getting people. But Dana, way to go! Congratulations on the they call it, I guess it's a Denver short-term rental advisory committee that you're part of with city council members. That is amazing, right? So you've gotten involved. What are the three things? What are the three things that you wish that you'd like, recommend that every vacation rental manager do that they're kind of not doing these days?
Yeah, I would say, some managers are doing this while others are leaving it up to the ones leading the charge. My experience with my local group, the Mile High Hosts, I wish I could say it was perfect and everyone should follow my lead, but I am absolutely figuring it out as we go. And it's support from people that are just looking to lift each other up, which is one of my favorite things about this community. Everyone truly is authentically wanting to be helpful to each other. But I'd say getting involved if you're not already involved, even if you can't dedicate time to your local advocacy group, offering things like, hey, we have resources, we have an in-house content writer. Oh, I know somebody that would fit that board position well. So it's not necessarily your time, but it's sometimes your resources that you can volunteer, especially for something that doesn't have any additional expenses for you. And then I would also say getting involved in your local community. So building bridges, joining chambers, if you can be a partner for your local DMO, doing things where you have a voice and a seat at the table. Those are going to be things that help further the relationships that you may later have to tap into. And just being genuine in building those relationships, because we can all see right through when somebody has something that they need from you, but offering your support and help to those where they're maybe feeling a little bit disarrayed with the current landscape we're on. So those are a couple things that I would suggest that property managers do.
That's awesome. I'm hearing a theme from both of you guys in this conversation that, this has really been a conversation of fear in the past, right? It's been a conversation of doom and gloom and, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And boy, I hope someone's got their eye on the ball, right? Well, the antidote to fear is love, right? And Dana, what you were just talking about your community and lifting each other up and helping each other and sharing resources. That is awesome. That's the antidote right there. It's all about love, right? And our whole industry is that way. And so it's really cool to see kind of that evolving, because this whole world is a world of pendulum swings, right? I mean, one night it's way over here, and another night it comes back over to be friendly, but it's always evolving, and it's not a static situation. So coming together as a community with like-minded people, that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, and along those lines, Philip, next question is to give us an example of a really, really well-run advocacy group and the kinds of activities that happen in the local area to help with that advocacy.
That's a great question, John. And it's kind of like my mom getting asked the question of which one of your children is the favorite. It's a very difficult answer to give you, and I think Dana's group up in Denver would definitely be on the short list. But just because it's top of mind for me, I would say San Diego, Share San Diego, the local alliance out of that city would be a great example of a well-run advocacy initiative, as well as a very robust local group. And let's take a little bit of a journey back in time. So the conversation about regulating vacation rentals in San Diego, which we all probably understand is an incredible vacation destination in its own right, really began over 5 years ago. And the story is always the same. These conversations take a long time. They never end. And to a large extent, they've been going on for a while. So in San Diego, our story begins about 5 years ago when the city council was seriously starting to consider regulating vacation rentals in the community. Fast forward a couple years as that conversation progressed, there was a particular city council member that was very anti-short-term rental, and in particular, very anti-traditional vacation rental, non-owner occupied, our bread and butter as property managers and owners. And she actually got a bill passed that would have banned traditional vacation rentals. And what we did as an industry with Share San Diego, with Expedia Group, is we ran an initiative to gather as many signatures from the community as we could to repeal that ban on traditional vacation rentals. And we were successful. And we couldn't have done it without the help of the local alliance, and in particular, their leader, Jonah Mechanic, who runs the group down there. And we thought we had a big win. We thought we had a big win on the board. And as it goes, as it did in Denver, as it's gone in markets across the country, we thought maybe that was the end of the conversation. Fast forward to a few months ago. We have that same city council member now running for mayor of San Diego, and we have quite a few other city council members that have all come out publicly and said, if we are elected, we are going to go back and ban again traditional vacation rentals in the city of San Diego. So what we did with the help of Share San Diego, and interestingly enough, for the first time in the United States, with the help of the local hotel union, Unite Here, which may sound strange, but you got to find friends wherever you can, going back to the idea of it takes a village. And we came to an agreement on a policy path forward that would give us certainty and give traditional vacation rental owners and managers inventory moving forward and not have to be living with the sort of Damocles over their head that the city council may come through and ban our industry once again. And we couldn't have gone through that 5-year evolution without the help and without the partnership and without the leadership of Share San Diego and Jonah Mechanic. So that is one example, and I think in particular, the thing that made them great was they had an incredible leader, still do today, Jonah Mechanic, but they also have an incredibly engaged membership who would come to the meetings, who would go to the rallies, who would reach out to city council, who would write letters to the editor, and that really helped move the public dialogue in our direction. So I would say, whether it's in San Diego, whether it's in Florida, whether it's in New Orleans, there are examples of these long-term conversations happening in local markets. But I think San Diego and Share San Diego in particular is a great example of a very well-run initiative as well as a group.
Yeah, I was in San Diego when Jonah Mechanic had one of his first receptions at one of his really beautiful homes that is part of his inventory. And the thing that struck me was how many people showed up because of Jonah, right? Now, the fact of the matter is that if you or I sent out a message saying, everybody come to this reception, we want to talk about the San Diego policies, some people would come, but gosh, the fact that Jonah, sent out the alarm. I mean, there were scores of people crammed into this little house. Well, it wasn't a little house, but it was a pretty big house. And but that's the energy. And then we come in and support that. And I think that's a really important distinction to make, because a lot of people look to Expedia Group and the different quote unquote platforms to kind of lead the way. But in that particular example, and examples that we're seeing all over the country, it's the local folks, it's you guys that are leading the charge, that are pulling people together in these communities and creating these things, not just for this one situation, but make new friends, right? And like-minded people. So with that,
John, I want to say one thing to add to that, John. I want to give Dana a shout out for doing a very similar thing in terms of being proactive. I just remember the first time I met Dana was at I think it was a ResFest conference and we were in a presentation being put on by somebody from our team. Presentation was spectacular, as I remember it. But I remember Dana coming up to me afterwards, approaching me and say, "Hey, you're the guy who's running public affairs for Expedia Group. I've heard of you. Our little group in Denver is getting restarted. We're going to do this Good Neighbor Summit. I want to pick your brain. Can you stick around afterwards and talk to us about that?" And I was like, "Absolutely, hell yeah." So it really does just take one local leader, one advocate, one person to put in the time, the dedication to say, "I'm going to ask some questions. I'm going to get a little bit involved." And you see the results of it today with a very successful group like Mile High hosts.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, but as we think about Expedia Group and Vrbo, right? We've got the companies like us and other platforms have got full-time staffs, right? We got all different kinds of resources. What should vacation rental managers expect, in your opinion, Dana, from companies like Vrbo and Expedia Group?
Yeah, I would say, at first it can feel overwhelming. Like I have no background in policy. I felt like, what am I doing leading this charge? But I kind of felt like if I didn't do it, then we would continue to see the shutdown of operators, and it wasn't going to be a pretty picture. So I think it's great to know the community that we're in is there to help you out. I'm somebody that will find an email and email that person and say, "Hey, I know you don't know me, but can you give me 20 minutes of your time?" And that's what I think is so incredible about just having confidence in finding those people that are there to help and support you. And Phil has been a huge help for the Mile High hosts. We're working on a bold and audacious initiative for a second license type here in Denver that would allow for non-primary residents, license holders. And this is how we are mapping out this road for economic recovery here in our city. And, coming up with this pilot program, you need to have someone to do a temperature check for you. And so knowing that I could reach out to Phil and say, "Hey, we've got this crazy idea. Are we on the right path? Are we taking the right approach? Is there anything or anyone we should be considering that we're not?" And he made time for us and gave us a ton of recommendations, which led us to break out into a multitude of different committees so we could all work towards setting up the perfect ecosystem to present and have, hopefully, a welcome reception of this pilot program that we're working on. But not only was Phil available to us, an already established advocacy group, I know that Expedia Group has helped other advocacy groups take off and form right from the ground up. They have an advocacy guidebook that they've created. They're professionals at helping create content and getting your content out there, whether it's an op-ed or a letter to the editor. And then they'll also put you in touch with other property managers. So Phil put me in touch with Jonah from San Diego. And, I always like to be respectful of someone's time, but I could geek out on this stuff for hours and just ask and ask and ask. But I think it's this mentality of when you take, you also know that you have a future version of yourself that you need to give back to later. So that is why I'm so honored to be a part of this event today, and hopes that those that maybe have been hesitant or unsure where to start, that they get inspired, that there are people and organizations like, Vrbo and Expedia Group that are looking to kind of put the roadmap out there for you. So you just fill in the blanks and hit the ground running.
That's awesome. I think one of the coolest things about this is, the leaders that I know, like you and Jonah, who take you guys are really cool people, right? And it's a way of just getting really cool people together, and it's fun that way. All right, so one more last question, and then we'll get to a few questions that have come in. How do property managers grow their business? I mean, we know that their businesses can go away, but how do they grow their business by being engaged in this kind of a community and advocacy effort?
Kind of like the example that I was giving. We know that the guests of today, they don't want to stay in a property where the underwear is in the top drawer and there's some like creepy family photo over the fireplace. staring at them while they attempt to log into your Netflix. They want to stay in a place that feels professional, that they have confidence, that they're going to get timely responses, that the place is cleaned, all of the things that us operators understand about the business. And so in order for us to continue growing our local presence here in Denver, we knew that proposing a non-primary residence type that was limited in location and in quantity would be an extension of us and give us more ability to provide those accommodations that we know the travelers of today want. So I'd say being in a leading role within my advocacy group allows me to drive that conversation. It also gave me the opportunity to sit on that short-term rental advisory board where I'm having conversations about potential new regulations for property managers, able to redirect the conversation to say it may not be property managers that are the problem here. It may be problem hosts. And how do we address and create more accountability? And so I can be more of a solution provider, which helps my bottom line. And then being in a leading role, whether I'm the one that's posting content in our Facebook group, I can't tell you how many times I've had people just say, hey, Dana, I want to ask you, do you have a guest contract or a client contract you can share with me? Or I'm getting my business up and running. What do you recommend? And I'm like, oh my God, this is my favorite topic. These are all the podcasts you need to subscribe to. These are the Facebook groups. And if you're not part of VRMB inner circle, like you'll have more information than you'll know what to do with. But then oftentimes those very people will come back to me and say, hey, this management thing is a little bit more than what I want to spend my time on. Can we talk about you providing management? So it's multifaceted in how it can help you grow your bottom line. And it's rewarding too, which I think is even, for me personally, is more rewarding than turning a profit.
That's very cool. You know what? One thing that I keyed on, one of your comments was that you're focusing on solutions, right? There's two ways to look at a situation. One is by focusing on the problem, and the other is by focusing on the solution. And I'll tell you, focusing on solutions is a lot more fun than focusing on the problem. And I think that's one of the shifts that has happened, that's kind of happening, is that, and to your point earlier, Phil, the idea of that antagonistic relationship with the government, I think, is kind of giving way to more of a cooperative relationship. And I think, I hope anyway, at least that's anecdotally kind of what I'm seeing. And you know, this whole revenues thing was COVID-19, and every place is hurting for revenue right now. You know, perhaps that might be a little bit of a silver lining around the little dark rain cloud that we're living under. Okay, so let's go. Yeah, go ahead.
I would just add one thing to all of this, which is leadership in a community doesn't go unrecognized. I'll give you just a really quick example. I think John, Dana, you may know him, but Eric Bay in New Orleans, who runs the Alliance for Neighborhood Prosperity, had a pretty small management business before he took the reins of that local group. And over the course of a year, homeowners started to see him in the newspapers, on the local TV station, you know, in the community as a leader for the local alliance. And to Dana's point earlier, they started to say, okay, well, this guy seems like he's leading the charge and he's very responsible. I'm going to give him my properties to manage. So it's a great opportunity when you don't think people are looking, they are. So leadership it always goes recognized. And if you're looking to get some additional homes on your underneath your management portfolio, I think taking up a leadership role in an alliance is a great way of doing it. Okay,
excellent, cool. All right, so let's get to a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is goes as follows: I live in a city where the city has already finalized their short-term rental regulations. What is the best way to get them to reopen the process and change their mind? Philip, you want to start with that?
I like Dana for this one. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I mean, this is something that I'm like, you know, making it up as I go, so to speak. I mean, it's so great. I mean, that's my life, but I hope it probably resonates with a few other people. I mean, the organization Rent Responsibly is a huge outlet that I would highly recommend getting acquainted with if you have not already. So, for example, They partnered with my local advocacy group where we created a guest survey. And then they're sharing that survey with other advocacy leaders so they can start pulling data from who's coming to their city. I'd say that's, you got to get your foot in the door somewhere. And when you speak to city council members, whether it's proposing a new license, the door may be closed on changing an advocacy, but maybe you could present, similar to what Denver's doing, is this second license type that would be in tandem with the primary residence license requirement. So I know this is probably a bigger question than we have time for today, but whomever asked that question, if you want to reach out to me at dana@effortlessrentalgroup.com, I would be happy to hop on the phone with you and share with you all of the things that we are doing to reopen the conversation.
There you go. That's awesome. And you know what, you guys, conversations are closed and they're reopened all the time. And, one of the things to be aware of is that conversations can be closed that are favorable to you and reopened. It happens all the time. So don't give up. Don't give up. And Dana, that's awesome that you're willing to help out and support everybody. All right. So another question that came in. Do you work closely with the Vacation Rental Managers Association, VRMA? Philip.
Great question. Absolutely. Vrbo, Expedia Group are incredible supporters, advocates, and believers in the Vacation Rental Management Association. So if you are not a member yet, I encourage you to join. If you are a member but you haven't gotten in and involved in the regulatory or the government affairs conversations happening at VRMA, I encourage you to do so. But I would say whether it's VRMA, the local chamber, the local realtors association, getting involved in those community organizations and national organizations is critical on your journey to getting more involved in the regulatory conversation.
Yep. VRMA, definitely. If you guys are not members, go check them out, right? Because they are the industry association, and lots and lots of resources there. And we are building. We're constantly growing and strengthening our relationship with them as well. So for sure, go check them out if you haven't already. All right, let's do one more quick question, then we need to wrap. Philip, are other platforms involved in advocacy efforts?
Another great question that we tend to get quite often. I would say this: myself, the team at Expedia Group Vrbo, are incredibly proud to be the organization that has stood behind traditional vacation rental owners and managers for the last 10 years plus. We are proud to have stood next to you all in advocating for fair policies for traditional whole home vacation rental owners and managers. And I hope you all see that in your local communities. And if you don't, please reach out and tell us how we could be doing better. But I think we stand out as the only platform that has stood behind you all consistently over the last decade. But that being said, I do think it is critically important that you have a big tent and that we have all the platforms engaged in discussions around fair and effective policies. And that includes the big platforms that I'm sure folks are on that have joined us today. So I would say we often communicate with them. We often work with platforms across the spectrum, but I can't be proud enough of the work my team does day in and day out.
Excellent. Awesome. Thank you, Phil. All right. Well, listen, we got 1 minute left, and I just wanted to close with a couple of thoughts. First of all, this is the only commercial I'm going to give you. There's another Rise and Shine session tomorrow at noon Pacific. It's about traveler insights and all the things that we're learning about travelers, and with lots and lots and lots of insights on what you can do with your listings to improve your conversions and your bookings. So please join us for that. The other thing is that you want to bookmark the site that you registered on, because on that same site are all the recordings of all the Rise and Shines that you guys can refer back to and share with your teams. Okay, so we're constantly doing Rise and Shines every month, multiples every month moving forward, and we're recording all of them. So use that as a resource center. Today's session, Philip and Dana, thank you so much. This was really cool. And it's really neat to see. I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged with. It seems like we have a little bit of wind in our sails, and but we got to keep the heat on. Dana, thank you so much for what you're doing for your community in the Denver area. So with that, any last words or comments, guys?
Yeah, John, I would just say really quickly, if you're one of the folks that are on the call today and you want to get involved in your community, but you don't know how, it's very easy to let us know. It's very easy to get engaged today. Take out your cell phones right now, text the word together to 52886. Once again, the word together to 52886. That'll let us know that you want to be engaged in your community, in your local regulatory conversation, and start to have conversations with folks like Dana and other property managers that are leading the charge. And then also, I just encourage folks to visit vrboadvocates.com, www.vrboadvocates.com, to learn more about how you can start getting involved in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, and get involved, guys, because you know what? If it's not happening in your neck of the woods, it's going to happen in your area sometime in the future. And now's a great time to start setting yourself up for success. Okay, so with that, Philip, Dana, thank you so much. Everybody who decided to join us today, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, John.